I want you to imagine, just for a second, getting the ultimate promotion at work.
Oh, boy.
You know, you are handed the absolute top job, the CEO position, the apex of your career.
Right.
But you get this promotion on the exact same day and for the exact same reason that your previous boss was murdered by an angry mob.
I mean, that definitely puts a rather dark cloud over the onboarding process.
Yeah, there is absolutely no cake in the break room for that one. You are just immediately thrust into the crosshairs.
Right into the fire.
Exactly. And that is where we are starting today's deep dive. We are looking at a man who was handed the most dangerous job in 12th century Europe.
And arguably, he was the man who wanted it the least out of anyone on the continent.
Totally. Today, we are tracing the autobiography of Pope Eugene III, also known as Blessed Pope Eugene III. He was the very first Cistercian monk to become pope.
Which is a huge deal, historically.
Right. And we've got a massive stack of sources for this deep dive to help us map out this completely chaotic life. We're pulling from historical analyses published by Cambridge University Press.
Good stuff in there.
Yeah, really dense but good. We also have medieval chronicles translated by De Re Militari, theological essays from the Regensburg Forum, and a wide array of biographical records.
And I think what stands out immediately in this collection of texts is how completely contradictory his life was.
Oh, completely.
I mean, we are talking about a deeply reluctant, obscure monk who suddenly has to navigate deadly Roman mobs, launch global military campaigns, and completely reform an incredibly wealthy, entrenched church hierarchy.
Our mission today is to figure out how this guy went from hiding in a monastery with a garden hoe to literally drawing the geopolitical map of the Middle Ages.
It's quite a leap.
Right. So let's unpack his human origins. Before he was Pope Eugene III, who was this guy?
Well, if you look at the historical records, his official name at birth was Bernardo.
Bernardo?
Yeah, and those records are actually a little murky on his exact last name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you will see him referred to as Bernardo Pignatelli, or Paganelli di Montemagno, or sometimes just simply da Pisa.
Because it was from Pisa.
Exactly, born in the Republic of Pisa around the late 1080s.
Okay, so around 1080, there also seems to be this fascinating historical debate about his socioeconomic status.
Oh, the family wealth debate, yeah.
Right. We have some sources claiming he came from a noble family, which, would be standard for high-ranking churchmen of the era, but other historians insist he came from a very poor family.
And that poverty narrative is incredibly sticky.
Why is that?
Because it aligns perfectly with his famously humble nature. I mean, whatever his financial origins, we know he started his career working as a subdeacon in a church in Pisa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, before being ordained as a priest by Pope Innocent II sometime in the 1130s.
Usually when we look at the early life profile of these major historical figures, we find some wild stories.
Right, the classic unsaintly youth.
Exactly. You know the tropes. They were partying, fighting in brutal wars, or chasing money before they finally found their calling.
But Bernardo was different.
Totally different. His friction with society wasn't that he was a rebel. His friction was that everyone, including himself, considered him utterly, hilariously unqualified for any kind of high office.
Yeah, his primary flaw, at least in the eyes of the 12th century political world, was his profound simplicity.
Right.
He simply was not a politician. He joined the strict Cistercian order and studied at the monastery of Clairvaux.
Under the famous Bernard of Clairvaux.
Exactly. The incredibly famous, powerful Abbot Bernard of Clairvaux.
Yeah.
And Bernardo was known everywhere as a, quote, rustic monk.
A rustic monk.
Yeah. He was eventually made abbot of the St. Anastasius Monastery outside Rome, but he was entirely a background player. He was just a guy who wanted to pray in silence and work the land.
Which makes his eventual promotion so insane. I mean, centuries later, St. Antoninus would call him, quote, one of the greatest and most afflicted of the popes.
Most afflicted is a very good way to put it.
Right. But at the time of his election, it's like being named the captain of the Titanic, but you get the promotion 5 minutes after the ship hits the iceberg. And your first act as captain is to jump into a lifeboat and try to command the sinking ship via megaphone from a mile away.
That is a remarkably accurate way to frame his papacy, actually. And the man who trained him was absolutely furious about the promotion.
Oh, I have to read this quote. When the cardinals elected Bernardo to be pope, his old mentor, Bernard of Clairvaux, essentially wrote a scathing letter to the papal curia.
Which was the Pope's administrative cabinet.
Right, the top guys.
Yeah.
And he wrote, well, He basically yells at them. He says, "God have mercy on you. What have you done? What reason, what counsel made you suddenly rush upon this rustic—"
Calling him rustic again.
Yeah, lay hands upon him when hiding from the world and knocking away his axe, mattock or hoe, drag him to the Palatine, place him upon a throne, and gird him with a sword.
It's so vivid.
It is. He literally asks the cardinals, "Had you no other wise and experienced man amongst you?"
It is a stinging rebuke of the entire electoral process.
Seriously.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, Bernard of Clairvaux wasn't just insulting his former student. He was terrified for him.
Oh, interesting. Terrified how?
Well, Bernardo's defining characteristic was his desire to hide from the world. He didn't want power. He didn't seek it. And his mentor deeply feared that this intense meekness would cause him to, as he put it, not exercise his apostolate with sufficient firmness.
He thought he'd be a pushover.
Exactly.
So you have this completely unqualified guy hiding in a monastery. The obvious question is, why did the cardinals ever choose him?
Right.
To understand that, we have to look at the absolute catastrophe that happened on February 15th, 1145.
That date is the turning point crisis.
The day the old boss was murdered.
Yes. The sitting pope, Lucius II, was dealing with a massive political revolt.
Okay.
The citizens of Rome, influenced by a radical thinker named Arnold of Brescia, were actively trying to strip the papacy of its temporal political power.
They wanted to run the city themselves.
Right. They established a commune, basically trying to restart the glory of the old Roman Republic, completely independent of church control.
Okay, so a full-on revolution.
Yeah. And Pope Lucius unwisely decided to take the offensive against the Roman Senate.
He led an actual physical military attack on the capital.
Which is wild. And during the heavy fighting, Pope Lucius II was struck in the head by a large stone thrown by the angry mob.
Wow.
Yeah, he died from his injuries shortly after.
Just absolute chaos. The CEO is literally murdered by the shareholders.
And that very same day, the College of Cardinals panicked.
I bet.
They needed a successor immediately.
Yeah.
And they needed someone completely unsoiled by the political corruption and military maneuvering that caused the riot in the first place.
Someone clean.
Exactly. So, in a secret, hurried election held on the safe, fortified territory of the Frangipani family, they elected the rustic monk Bernardo.
And he takes the name Eugene III.
He was thrust into the papacy, yeah.
It strikes me that getting elected wasn't a victory. It was essentially an eviction. Because of the violent mob, he instantly becomes a homeless CEO.
Yeah, he absolutely could not use his own headquarters. Eugene III had to flee Rome almost immediately.
That's crazy.
He couldn't even be consecrated in the city. He had to travel 40 kilometers north to the Farfa Abbey just to be officially installed.
So the mob is so dangerous, he just has to run. And this becomes the defining tragedy of his rule.
It really does.
For almost his entire 8-year pontificate, because of the hostile Roman commune in Arnold of Brescia, the Pope lived in exile.
Wandering around.
Yeah. He spent his time in places like Viterbo, Siena, and wandering through France. He was literally a pope without a Rome.
Which forces us to ask, how a homeless CEO actually wields power.
Right. You would think a guy on the run who never wanted the job in the first place would just hide and let the institution crumble.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But Eugene leans into his unique charism, his core superpower, which was his unshakable Cistercian humility.
This is where he proves his old mentor both right and wrong. Eugene III was now the most powerful spiritual leader in Europe, but he refused to let go of his monastic roots.
Right, he kept his identity.
Yeah, our sources tell us that even when he was forced to wear the luxurious silk papal robes required by his office, he secretly wore the coarse, rough, scratchy wool habit of a Cistercian monk hidden underneath them.
I love that detail. It was his personal anchor to reality. And he needed it because his most complex friction wasn't just with the Roman mob trying to kill him.
Oh, who else was he fighting?
It was actually with his own allies, specifically his old mentor, Bernard of Clairvaux.
The guy who yelled at the cardinals?
The very same. Bernard wrote a famous book-length treatise directly to Eugene called On Consideration. It was essentially a behavioral mirror for the papal office.
I read some of the excerpts from that, and it is intense.
It really is.
Bernard warns Eugene not to become the successor of Constantine. He didn't want Eugene surrounded by wealth, gold, and massive legalistic administration.
Right.
Bernard told the Pope that he needed to view his role through the metaphor of a sweating peasant.
Bernard constantly reminded him of the Apostle Peter, who famously said, "Silver and gold have I none."
There is a massive tension there, though. I mean, Eugene is trying to manage a sprawling, wealthy, highly administrative church network across an entire continent,
Yeah.
while his spiritual father is constantly in his ear yelling, "Don't forget, you're just a monk with a hoe." How does he reconcile the hypocrisy of managing vast wealth while idolizing poverty?
By establishing an incredibly strict administrative discipline.
Okay.
He wasn't a pushover. If we look at the Council of Reims in 1148,
Right.
which was a major reform synod, essentially a massive mandatory summit for high-ranking church leadership, Eugene called the meeting to enforce new standards.
And when a bunch of bishops and high-ranking churchmen simply decided they didn't need to show up to a meeting called by an exiled pope,
Yeah, what does he do?
he suspended them, strictly and immediately.
Exactly. According to the Cambridge University Press analysis, he wielded his canonical authority brilliantly.
Wow.
See, a bishop's power came from their connection to the Pope, not their physical proximity to Rome. By suspending them, he cut off their legal and spiritual authority.
That's a huge power move.
It is. He also managed a very delicate balancing act. He granted privileges to Cistercian houses, like exempting them from paying tithes on the labor they performed themselves.
Oh, a nice perk.
But he was very careful not to undermine the authority of the local diocesan bishops. He was enforcing discipline across the board, proving you don't need a palace to project authority.
And that projection of authority leads directly to his massive geopolitical legacy. Let's look at the Second Crusade.
Right, a huge chapter for him.
Yeah. In 1144, the Crusader state of Edessa fell to Muslim armies. And Eugene responds by issuing a document called Quantum Predecessors on December 1st, 1145.
Which he then reissues in March of 1146.
Right. Now, this document is a papal bull, a binding official legal decree from the Pope stamped with a lead seal.
And it is a watershed moment in history.
Why is that?
Because it wasn't just a vague, fiery call to arms from a pulpit. It was a highly structured, legalistic framework for a holy war.
Ah, okay.
He promised the remission of sins, known as an indulgence, and he offered strict ecclesiastical protection for the families and property of those who took up the cross.
I read the details of this bull, and I was shocked by how specific it is. It reads exactly like a highly rigid military contract.
It really does.
He's telling these kings and knights, okay, you're going on a holy mission, so you will act like it. He explicitly forbade the Crusaders from bringing expensive clothes.
Yes.
He banned them from bringing hunting dogs and falcons. He even strictly outlawed gilded or silvered arms.
And that detail tells you exactly what the First Crusade had devolved into for many of these nobles.
How so?
It had become an armed vacation.
Wow.
Yeah, a grand status symbol where knights paraded their wealth across Europe and the Middle East. Eugene, the guy wearing the scratchy wool shirt under his silk robes,
Yeah.
is looking at these armies and saying, this is not a hunting trip. This is a brutal spiritual duty. Leave the gold at home.
And he's managing all of this from exile. He didn't stop at the Middle East either. He also issued another bull, Divina Dispensazione,
Yes.
which granted the exact same spiritual indulgences to knights who fought in the Wendell Crusade against the pagan Slavs in Northern Europe.
Yeah, he is literally orchestrating a multi-front global war from wandering camps in France.
It's unbelievable.
And amidst all this grand geopolitical maneuvering, he also finds himself playing the incredibly bizarre role of a medieval marriage counselor.
Oh, this is easily my favorite historical anecdote from the sources.
It's so good.
So, King Louis VII of France and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine go on the Second Crusade. It is a total military disaster.
Absolute mess.
Right. They are actively blaming each other. There are wild rumors of Eleanor having an affair. They are barely speaking. And on their way home in 1149, they stop in Tusculum to see the Pope.
And Eugene, who our sources describe as a gentle, kind-hearted man who genuinely hated seeing people unhappy, decides he's going to fix the royal marriage, and doing it through a surprisingly modern method. He forces the King and Queen of France to sleep in the same specially prepared bed.
Wait, really?
Yes. And he spends days having deep, isolated conversations with them, trying to help them restore their love and communicate.
So the Pope, a celibate Cistercian monk who has spent his entire life hiding from the world, is doing intense couples counseling for the most powerful, dramatic, wealthy couple in Europe.
It is entirely surreal.
Yep.
And as history tells us, it completely failed.
Yeah, definitely didn't work.
No. 2 years later, Eugene gave up and officially annulled the marriage. Eleanor, of course, went on to marry Henry II of England, radically changing the course of European history.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. But that Tusculum meeting shows you the intensely personal, emotional burden Eugene carried on top of the administrative ones.
Which brings up a fascinating dynamic regarding his spirituality. On one hand, we have this hyper-pragmatic pope.
Right.
He's writing strict military contracts, he's managing complex tax exemptions for monasteries, he's doing couples therapy.
Right.
But he is also a deeply spiritual man, living in an era defined by extreme mysticism.
What's interesting is that Eugene himself isn't known for performing dramatic lifetime miracles.
Okay.
You won't find stories of him levitating or miraculously taming wild animals. His relationship with the supernatural was entirely about validation. He was the anchor of reality that allowed the supernatural to be officially recognized by the medieval church.
I struggle to see him as a champion of the supernatural, though.
Really? Why?
Well, validating other people's visions feels less like deep mysticism and more like standard administration. Isn't he just putting a bureaucratic stamp of approval on a PR problem so he doesn't have rogue mystics running around undermining the church?
I mean, that is a completely fair suspicion. But the historical context suggests it was a profound synthesis, not just a PR move.
Okay, walk me through it.
During his pontificate, Eugene III was presented with the writings of a German Benedictine abbess named Hildegard of Bingen.
Oh, she's famous.
Very. She was a polymath, a composer, a scientist, and a mystic who experienced incredibly vivid, sometimes terrifying prophetic visions.
Right.
And the local church leaders didn't know what to do with her. They thought she might be crazy, or worse, a dangerous heretic.
Because if you start claiming God is speaking directly to you, bypassing the priests and the bishops in the 12th century, you are walking a very dangerous line.
Exactly the risk. The case makes its way up the chain to Pope Eugene. He convenes the Synod of Trier.
Okay.
And Eugene, the practical administrator, sits down and personally reads her visionary works.
He actually reads them himself.
Yes, and instead of shutting her down to protect his own institutional monopoly on truth, he formally approves her visions as genuine revelations from the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
He even writes a letter directly to her, actively encouraging her to continue writing and recording what she sees.
That completely flips the script. He's looking at this wild, unregulated, raw spirituality and saying, no, this is real. This belongs inside the church, not outside of it.
Exactly. By validating her, this humble, practical pope bridged the massive gap between the church's strict, legalistic administration and raw divine mysticism.
That's amazing.
He gave an officially sanctioned voice to one of the greatest female minds of the Middle Ages. He recognized that the rigid institution needed the oxygen of mysticism just as much as the mysticism needed the legal protection of the institution.
So if you're listening to this and wondering how a guy carrying the weight of European wars, royal marriages, and divine visions kept from collapsing, the truth is, well, he didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Which brings us to his final days. How does the story of the reluctant pope actually end?
His transitus, which is the theological term for a holy person's passing from this world, is actually quite melancholy.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Eugene III never fully won back his city. He died on July 8, 1153 in the town of Tivoli of natural causes.
No.
He was roughly in his early 70s.
Okay.
And he died while waiting. He was desperately waiting for the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa to send military aid to help him finally crush the commune and retake Rome.
But the aid didn't come.
No, the aid never came in time.
So he dies in exile. He never gets to go back to his own headquarters.
Never.
But what happens to his body? The Romans hated his politics so much they literally stoned his predecessor to death.
Right.
Do they desecrate his remains?
This is where we see a fascinating distinction in how the medieval mind separated politics from spirituality.
Oh.
Despite the Roman citizens violently rejecting his temporal political authority in life, they universally recognized his deep spiritual holiness.
Interesting.
When he died, the political hostility vanished almost instantly. His body was brought back to Rome, and the citizens welcomed it. He was buried in the Vatican with, as the chronicles specifically note, every mark of respect.
So they fiercely hated the CEO, but they deeply revered the monk.
Exactly. And the canonization timeline strongly reflects this divide. Almost immediately after his burial, reports began to spread of miracles occurring at his Vatican tomb.
Wait, really? The same people?
Yeah. The very people who had chased him out of the city and forced him to live in tents in France were now flocking to his grave for spiritual healing.
That is wild.
He was revered locally for centuries. And finally, in 1872, after a long historical investigation, he was officially beatified by Pope Pius IX.
Earning the title Blessed Pope Eugene III.
Yep.
Let's bring this all back to you, listening right now. Summarizing the ultimate irony of Eugene III's life is almost dizzying.
It really is.
Here is a man who wanted absolutely nothing more than to be left alone in a quiet, obscure monastery with his hoe and his prayers. He was a bench warmer who desperately wanted to stay on the bench.
Right.
Yet he ended up shaping the geopolitical map of Europe, launching global crusades, reforming the medieval church hierarchy, and managing the most powerful kings and queens of his era.
It is the absolute embodiment of the reluctant leader ideal. We naturally love that narrative.
We do.
We tend to believe that the person who doesn't want the ring of power is the only one who can actually be trusted to carry it without becoming corrupted.
But looking at Eugene III's life through the lens of all these incredible sources, I want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought to mull over.
Okay.
His spiritual purity was absolutely preserved. I mean, he died with that scratchy wool shirt still hidden under his robes.
Yeah.
But look at his massive projects. His military crusades were a disastrous, bloody failure. He completely failed to fix Louis and Eleanor's royal marriage. And he died exiled, locked out of his own city, waiting for an army that never arrived.
It's a tough track record.
So the question is, does extreme reluctance to rule actually prevent a leader from fully mastering the very institution they are supposed to save?
That's a great question.
When the angry mob is at the door and the jagged rocks are flying and you've just been handed that bloody promotion, does true systemic reform require the humility of a sweating peasant or the ruthless ambition of a willing king?
Something to think about.